months. It's how to motivate safety leadership. And that is essentially turning followers in the review of safety styles and models. And who is going to be speaking today is, I was in a class, oh boy, it's been about 6 or 8 months ago with the University of Washington, and encountered this gentleman by the name of John Sowers, who is today's speaker. And you can see by his credentials, I had to give him an additional line underneath his name because there are so many letters behind his name. Now, John, while being very qualified, caught my attention by his ability to speak and his information on safety leadership, which I'm absolutely a proponent of. And he is a senior safety management consultant and safe and healthful workplace center at SAFE. And so let's see here. Give me one moment, John. You jumping the gun just a little bit. So.
Oh, sorry about that. My bad.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. We are, let's see here. What is SAFE? And just to give you a background, is SAFE has been serving Oregon since 1914. And SAFE is Oregon's non-for-profit workers' comp insurance company who protects Oregon's employers and workers with exceptional, affordable coverage. And the vision of SAFE in our sister state there is SAFE strives to make Oregon one of the safest and healthiest workplaces around, and SAFE is committed to helping Oregonians work better, smarter, and safer. So without further ado, John, go ahead and let's hear from you.
And I guess now, and I apologize there at hijacking. So now I can share my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it. So yeah, sorry, I jumped the gun there. I got a little excited. It happens. So can everybody see my slides okay?
Yep.
Great. Well, hey, thank you for that. And one of the things I want to say before I start today's presentation is that I'm really a firm believer in that the collective groupthink has so much more to it than just a single presenter. And if you were in one of my classes later today, which I'm going to be teaching, I try to keep my group sizes around 10 people. And as a presenter, as a facilitator, all those initials are great, but the people who are actually doing the work, they are the experts in their particular area. So I really do try to make it a habit when I'm teaching smaller groups to keep my speaking to about 30% of the time and get the group to comment. So that being said, with a large group like this, I kind of have to shift the paradigm a little bit. I will be, and just a little warning here, I will be asking for a few people to provide some input. So if I call on you, go ahead and unmute. And it's also okay to say, I got nothing. John, I'm drawing a blank. When I call on people at random, sometimes your mind is someplace else and you may not have something to input. If you do, just let me know that. So let's talk about this. And this is a journey that I want to share with you. And it's a leader instead of a leader follower. And what's kind of fun is the beginning of the journey. And this is really about a book club that I started to help change safety cultures, but not just change safety cultures, but change corporate cultures. And it is a story about the submarine, the Santa Fe, and a captain named David Marquet. And it's also a story about a safety consultant. And what's kind of interesting is both David Marquet and the safety consultant had to do what they needed to do out of a little bit of desperation. And I'm going to explain the beginning of my journey, and then I'll explain the beginning of Marquet's journey, and then, why should any of this matter? Why do we want to change the culture? So the beginning of my journey is that once COVID was hitting us full force, SAFE proactively really clamped down on field visits for us safety consultants. We have 80 of us throughout the state, and they said the last thing they want is a safety consultant who's going from business to business to business suddenly create a super spreader event by us going to 10 different businesses. So they said it's virtual visits only, phone consulting. And so now I'm scrambling, trying to figure out how do I service my clients, change their safety cultures, improve their safety cultures, and still, be able to provide something meaningful. And I thought this might actually be a great opportunity. I've always wanted to have the time to delve into leadership training because I'm a firm believer that quality leadership will improve the overall business. But when you look at things like accountability for safety also equals accountability in terms of production. And a lot of times, a problem, let's say building something, because people aren't being accountable or held accountable, could be that same problem not following safety rules and procedures. So I said, look, this is a great opportunity. So I started with two tacks. The first was a deep dive into a safety culture by picking a book that I really liked, and it was David Marquet's Turn the Ship Around, and it's how he changed the safety culture on his submarine. I also did a 7-session leadership training, which was for newer supervisors, not as seasoned managers. The book club was an incredibly deep dive. And that's actually what we're going to be touching on today is some of the aspects of the story that came out of the Santa Fe and the Turn the Ship Around. Again, all of this was out of desperation for me. Interesting note, David Marquet, desperation as well. So what do I mean by desperation? He trained as a submarine commander to have one submarine, and he trained 1 year every aspect of that submarine, the pipe layout, the electrical system. He was the smartest person on the planet for that one single submersible. And at the end, they changed assignments for him. 2 weeks before he was going to take that submarine he had spent a year learning about, they gave him the Santa Fe. The Santa Fe was the worst submarine. Performance was horrible. Its retention of people was horrible. It was literally the submarine that everybody snickered at, and they used as this is what you shouldn't do. And so he realized that instead of coming in as a strong captain that knew everything, he's now going to have to rely on the crew to help lead him as much as he's leading them. And for me, the big why about this is that within a year, he literally turned the performance of this ship around. He had a more engaged crew. He had a crew that took ownership. And even though not everybody was a leader of multiple people, everybody took on their own individual role of leadership depending on the size. And that might have been maybe they were only a leader for one person, or maybe they were just leading themselves. But they started thinking like a leader. Now, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about all the transformations that occurred on the Santa Fe. So again, as I warned you earlier, you might be called on. So as we go through this presentation, if I call on you, if you've got an answer, welcome to speak up. And if not, just say, hey, John, I'm drawing a blank, and I'll move on to somebody else. So I had a videotape, which unfortunately we could not show. I could show pictures, but I couldn't show the videos. So I'm going to talk about 3 leadership styles before I move into my first set of questions. Oh, and by the way, the presentation that will go out will include a link so you can watch this video. And the 3 leadership styles that the video talks about are autocratic leadership, democratic leadership, and laissez-faire leadership styles. And when you think of autocratic leadership, you can think of a king or a queen or just an authority figure that they are the person that has all the answers. They are the leader, and there are people that follow them. And I would say, for example, you might talk about a battalion chief or a fire captain. They're the leader. They're telling their subordinates what to do. A general in battle, something like that. Now, that is a very powerful leadership style. And if you're a Star Trek fan, I always think of, Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk always had the answers, and he was telling his crew what to do. That's one leadership style. And then there's a democratic leadership style where you want to get kind of groupthink. You want to get group opinion and group buy-in. And that can be a very effective style. And people sometimes prefer that style because they feel like they're a part of the process. And then there's this final style that kind of sounds a little flaky. And actually, it's what David Marquet turned his ship into, was laissez-faire, where essentially the leader kind of steps back and says, you all know what to do. I'm going to get out of your way and let you do your job. And one of the things that the captain did on his ship is he never issued an order. He asked a crew member, what's your intention? So if they needed to submerge the ship, he'd say, what do you want to do? I want to submerge the ship. He'd say, what do you need to do? What's your intention? And that crew member would say, these are the things I intend to do. The only thing the captain had to do is say, great, do it. And so those are some leadership styles. And the reason I wanted to present those first is the journey is Marquet came in as a strong leader to change the culture, but he got the input from the crew, almost a democratic leadership style, and eventually shifted to a very structured laissez-faire, or a style where he just kind of stood back and let his people do their job. So I'm going to move on to that. Many organizations have one authority and they have the ability to tell others what to do, and they command obedience. Now, the first person I'd like to call on is Dan Cabot. Are you available, and can you unmute for just a moment?
Sure. Yeah, what do you got?
So Dan, if you have an authoritative leader who says, do this, follow, go that direction, what could be wrong with that model?
Oh, well, I've experienced that and do have my eyes on various models, and that model is difficult. It puts stress and decreases communication with the workers on the crew. They're afraid to say anything, and they're stressed to perform, not only to perform their job, but oftentimes stressed to go too fast and perhaps take shortcuts. So there's all kinds of things that I don't like about that particular leadership style. And yeah, I've had my share of those supervisors over the years, and it's a challenge to get them to be to change that.
Hey, thank you. I couldn't have asked. In fact, I want to also thank you because you essentially just stated from the video that I was going to show some of the things that are wrong with the model. And you literally, I'm assuming, you haven't seen that video yet, have you?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Okay, perfect. Because I just wanted to make sure, because that was perfect. That's exactly what I needed. So thank you. And the reason I have the picture of the person going off the cliff is I always remind myself it's a great model if the leader is always right, and if not, you all go off the cliff or you go off the waterfall together. Now, I want to reverse it though, because one of the things the video does is it contrasts each leadership style, and it does say, these models can be effective. And so now, do I really like that model? Not so much, but it is nevertheless an effective model. It's been used for 100 plus years. It's an older model of leadership, but it worked for a long time. So Jamie, I think it's Jamie Stewart. Are you available?
Yeah, I'm available.
Can you say in what circumstance might that very strong autocratic leadership model be effective?
It kind of depends on the audience. I think with some of the more seasoned people that you work with, that they take to that type of management style, where more of a militant style, I guess I would say. They want to be directed. They want to be told. They want it cut and dried, black and white. Doesn't work so well with some of the newer folks that haven't been in the trade as long.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm in my later 50s, And that's a model that I grew up with. So it certainly can be incredibly effective. I will also say that, and thank you, by the way, that was exactly what I needed. I think of emergencies. I'm a former paramedic, and I remind myself that in an emergency we don't have really time to take a vote. We don't have time to, take a poll. So, we may have a captain, battalion chief that is running the show. Interesting note, though, we're also highly trained that we all know what our individual jobs are. So we may have that leader directing things, but we as a crew also have a pretty good idea of what our roles are. But it can be effective. Certainly not always my first choice, but it certainly can be effective. So, hey, is it Mindy? I think it's Mindy Buxton. Are you available? Nope. How about Brenda? Brenda, are you available? Wow. Okay, I had written down some names. So how about Randy? Randy Clark?
Yes.
Okay, Randy. So Randy, and this one is a little bit more of an ambiguous question, so I'll see what how you feel with it. So when you have a strong leader and that leader tells you to do something and it goes horribly wrong, what does that allow the people that just did that horribly wrong thing to do? To do what?
To blame the leader. Well, they told us to do it. He told us to do it. So, hey, it's not our fault.
Exactly right. There is absolutely no personal accountability. I was just doing what I was told to do. And I want to tell a kind of a fun story from the Turn the Ship Around. And thank you very much for the input. Turn the Ship Around. As I told you before, Captain Marquet did not know this submarine. And he ordered the submarine to do 2/3. And he looked at his sailor and said, set the speed at 2/3. And the sailor said, aye, aye, sir. And he just stared at Marquet for a moment and nothing happened. And he stared back at the captain. And the captain said, what's going on? There's no 2/3 on this dial. Now the sailor knew there was no 2/3, but here's the captain, the authority, telling him do 2/3. And he said, sailor, why did you do that if you knew there was no 2/3 on that dial? Because you told me to, sir. And I should explain, this was early on in the culture change on the submarine. And what it kind of did is reminded Marquet that, yeah, we need to do some changes here. Because if this had been battle, and I had given a bad order, and that sailor had known that that was a bad order, and he is just blindly carrying out that order, that can cause some problems. So he realized early on that he was on the right track to get people to take more ownership. Leadership is not some mystical quality that some possess and others do not. And this is a quote directly from the book. And I want to ask, Brian, I'd like actually you to jump in on this one. What does that statement mean to you? This idea that, leadership isn't exclusive to just a small number of individuals.
Well, it's definitely something that has to be ingrained in the total workforce, and it doesn't come easy and it doesn't come fast. It takes a period of time.
Hey, thank you, Brian. In fact, that's why I had two options for my pictures for this slide. I had a boxer, and I thought for some people they actually have to fight their way to leadership. It's a lot of work. Or a player who is constantly practicing. But yeah, it is a lot of work. And Brian, I'll ask you a question. Getting people to become leaders, can the process sometimes be messy?
Yes, because it's a transitional way of conducting safety from the autocratical style that some of us older people are used to, and yet we still have to accommodate the newer generations who are probably more motivated by different styles.
And thank you for that. And that's exactly what I need. Thank you so much. And I think when I say messy, it's autocratic is seductive because it's easier. I give people orders, I look at them and I give them a binary statement. Do you understand that? Yes, sir. Now we all know, because we've all been in that position of the yes, sir, they may not understand it, but nevertheless, it's an easier style. When you start getting to that style where you want everybody to take ownership and take leadership, it takes a lot of work. In fact, that's what we're going to be getting to right now, is what do you need to do to make these things work, to make this style effective? If you're going to create a leader-leader model instead of a leader-follower model, and the reason I use the term messy, and I want to give a shout out too for listening to the resources that I give you at the end of this presentation. Uh, David Marquet did a 45-minute talk at Google. I included the link to that. I also included the link to the audiobook and the print book. This was a year-long process, and it was not always pretty. And there were times that the captain himself said, I'm going back to the old style. And he was encouraged by other leaders who said, no, you're on the right track. Stay that course, keep doing it. So in order to divest control, there's two things you need. If you're going to remove control, and the reason I'm showing all of these pieces interlocked is without them, you're not going to be able to create a leader-leader culture. You need to have competency and clarity. And specifically, we're going to talk about each one of those right now. So I want to ask a question about control.
Before you ask that question, John, somebody's got their microphone unmuted. Everybody can check and make sure their microphone is muted. And your video should be muted unless you're John, unless you want us to see you. Thanks.
Hey, no problem. Anthony Cox, are you available?
I am.
Hey, Anthony, I want to ask you a question. And this is about control. If you were to be trying to change a culture, let's say brand new employees, and you suddenly just give up control too soon, what happens to that culture if you give up control?
Well, it depends on the specifics of it, of which kind of control you're giving up, because I have a tendency of wanting to give control to people that are competent in a particular area, and if they a lot of people are too frightened to step out and do something or make a decision. So I want to give them that authority to do that. And then, making sure that it's not a type of situation that if it gets messy, it really destroys the whole situation. But I want to give them enough authority so that they start to feel better about themselves as they make those decisions, and then taking it offline with them, saying, hey, that's great. I love what you did. This is what I might have done slightly different. Did you think about this? And together as a couple or as a group or as a set of leaders, you can start to grow together. Because I'm looking to hire and then train my replacement. I want somebody to have as much authority as I do, and then I can sit back and say, then all I have to do really is find what the obstacles are and take that out of somebody's way, so that they can make their site or their region a much more productive safety culture.
Thank you. That was perfect. And don't unmute yet. I just wanted to ask you. So that's actually perfect, because I love giving up control during presentations as well. And I'd like to encourage all of you, if you've noticed that all of the comments we've been getting have been some pretty profound stuff and really added to this presentation. Don't be afraid to ask for that during a presentation. It's always a little scary because sometimes you might just hear crickets. But it's also, you get a lot of really good stuff. So getting back to somebody, if you were to give up control, though, to somebody that had no competence, so you just give them control, but they have no competence in that subject matter area, what then might happen?
This is directed to me again, Anthony.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
So if that were the case, one, I probably wouldn't necessarily give them control as much as guidance, and or put them on a team with people that have competencies, so that maybe as a pseudo leader, they can grab the competencies from others on the team. Because if you don't have the competency in a particular area in safety, it can create quite an issue. So why not uh, sync them up with people that maybe not be the safety guy, but they have experiences in that particular field, and then you encourage that person without the competencies to have, a meeting. I'm not a big fan of lots and lots of meetings, but a meeting so that you can start to understand the intricacies of this particular subject matter, and then then look for the style that they might start to develop by at least at one point being a little more democratic, where he's getting information from the consensus, and then this seems to make a sense. What's common sense to actually go forward with a decision. So I would think that might be helpful.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And yes, and I think what I always say is that sometimes when you give up control too soon, you can actually sabotage people. So if you're going to give up control, you have to make sure that the team has competence. And basically, I'm going to actually answer this question is talk a little bit about some of the things that Marquet did on the submarine. Um, how does competence impact the level of control required? The more competent the team, the more trained they are, the more you can. And in the case of Marquet, he believed in certification, and I'll tell you where this came from. As I told you earlier, I'm a former paramedic. I still keep my emergency medical technician license current, along with my CPR and a couple of other professional certifications. I am certified every 2 years. So when you're not breathing in front of me, we don't need to have a briefing saying, John, did you check the scene for safety? Did you make sure to put on your gloves? Did you make sure to protect yourself from disease? That is all a part of my certification. So one of the things that Marquet was a firm believer in is don't brief, certify. Certify to make sure they know what to do, so that when the what hits the fan, they are ready, willing, and able. And the other reason he's not a big fan of briefings, and when I say briefings, those 35-minute briefings where you fall asleep during half of them and you don't even necessarily hear the person that was doing the briefing. His whole thought was, well, wait a minute, how much of that briefing could have been covered during certification? And maybe that briefing should have only been the few things that are unique to the situation we're in, but not all the other information that we could have done in a training or a certification prior. So competency is critical. And sometimes certification is also a critical component, because certification is, and I'll go off on a quick tangent for a moment. Lockout tagout. I did an incident analysis a couple months ago of a lockout tagout violation. 20-year employee did not follow lockout tagout procedures. As we started doing our investigation, we found out that the procedures were so complicated, nobody understood them. And to take it a step further, while he had been trained in those procedures, at no time did anyone come out and actually verify that that individual knew how to perform those procedures. Meaning, they signed the sheet saying they understand the policy, they did an obligatory training, and they said, you are now trained, therefore you must know it. And there was never follow through beyond that to make sure that they understood the skills. Competency is critical. And then the last thing is team clarity, expectations of your goals, the mission. All of that impact the level of control. The more clear your expectations, the more clear your goals, the more clear the mission, the more control you can back off and give more control away. Part of the reason I was able to, with our group today, able to ask all of the participants out who are watching me, is we have a group of highly trained, experienced safety professionals. And frankly, I might have even tried this with apprentices, because it'd be interesting to hear their perspective. But the point was, due to the level of expertise, I was able to give up a little control of my presenter as a presenter with the faith that you guys would be able to give me what I need during my presentation. So this idea of clarity of expectations, goals, and the mission will directly impact. So just as a reminder, if you're going to let off the control and allow people to be more laissez-faire, they need to be competent and you need to have clear expectations. If you give up control without those two pieces in place, you are going to set a person up for failure. So the journey continues. Let me tell you a little bit about the Santa Fe and what happened after Marquet tried this experiment. And before I go any further, I should explain, he tried this experiment when he was an engineer on another submarine, and it failed dismally. Why? Because he was trying the leader concept only within his little department within that submarine. I think he had 6 people, but the overall way they led was a strong leader and followers. So he was trying to do it within a culture that didn't allow that. So understand that his success with the Santa Fe was built on a failure from an earlier try. So when he took over the ship, it was the worst ship in the fleet. In fact, they actually used some of the pictures of the crew and how bad they looked to say they don't want your crew to look like this. You don't want them to be this sloppy. You don't want them doing this. And he took the ship over, and essentially within a year, they had the highest retention rate of any submarine. What I mean by retention is more people stayed with the ship. And a year prior, the majority of the people left the ship after being with them for a year. Now, the other testament, and Marquet is very, very proud of this fact, is that more leaders came out of that ship. So that means the enlisted, more leaders moved up with the enlisted. The officers' corps, there were more admirals and captains that came out of that ship. There were more leaders that came out of that ship. The other thing he was incredibly proud of, and I appreciate a couple of you alluded to this idea of wanting to mentor other leaders. To me, this is maybe the biggest why behind this leader concept. If I could only pick one thing that makes it a wonderful, outstanding concept, is that you are building future leaders. You are also creating a system, and this is what I think I'm the most excited about, in addition to the building of the leaders, is you're building a system that after you're gone, this submarine, after he left, still had top marks, still did well years after he was no longer the captain. So there was a system in place, a style that took hold on that ship that went way beyond the tenure of this single captain. And that's one of the things I love, is not only did he create leaders, but he helped to build a system or a style that carried out long after he was gone. So I will take a breath, and I'd like to ask, are there any questions?
John, I just dialed in. Do we start at 9?
Yes, we did.
Oh, I'm bummed. All right.
I am
Hey,
so
hey,
sorry about
John.
that. Question.
Hey, John. This is Christian with PCI. It's funny that we have this topic for today. I need to come up with a topic for. We have a quarterly safety focus that we do at PCI, and it's my first go around. And something I thought would be good was motivating workers to perform safe work. So I really would like to get in contact with you at a later date and see if we can get something put together, because I think this is the topic I want to go with.
I'd be more than happy to do that. In fact, if I don't, everybody's gonna get PDFs of my slides, so they can go out. My
Okay.
contact information will be on them. SAFE has, and I'll get to it in just a moment. So I want to let you know, I'm going to answer your question because there's some resources I'm going to send you to. I'll ask though, are there any other questions before I reveal the additional resources?
Quick question.
Sure.
What time frame did this all occur? The ship. The submarine.
Oh, good question. It was in the early 2000s that it occurred. And from my best understanding of what I've read since then, it's kind of the transition that has occurred, I guess, throughout the submarine corps, this leadership style. But this original, the book was written in 2016, but the story was based on the right around 1999 to through about 2001. Is that what you were asking specifically?
Yeah, thank you. Just give me a little reference.
Any
And
other
by the
questions?
way, John, they're not going to get the copy of this presentation unless they email me, because once you send me the PDF, then I'm happy to forward it on to anybody who requests it.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Okay.
I overpromised. Sorry.
Brian,
Any
that's
other?
known as being an autocrat.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Also, if when John posts those on his presentation here, you can also take a screenshot of that, folks. That way you have that saved in your photo archive, or contact Brian, and Brian can get you that presentation. And Bob Scarborough, just to let you know, we did record this presentation. So if you're interested, Brian can send you the link, or I can send you the link. Just let us know, and you can go ahead and watch that if you missed it.
Yeah, and give me about 3 or 4 hours to get it uploaded to the Smart YouTube website.
That'd be awesome, Brian. I was actually looking forward to this, John, so disappointed that my schedule is wrong. Had to be because in Arizona we don't change time, and y'all change time on us.
I know. Remember, we're the West Coast. We run rogue. That's Oregon, Washington, and California. We're rogues out here. Any other questions? So to be respectful of everybody's time, I'm going to move forward just to make sure I do finish this up at 10 o'clock. I'll go slow enough so that if you do want to capture a screenshot, you're welcome to. So here's the link. And by the way, just so you all know, Marquet has done another book since 2015 when his first book came out. He has another book that I love. It's called Leadership is Language. However, from the standpoint of culture change, I still really prefer the turn the ship around, and I've included the link to that. Because part of that book club that I ran, and I should explain how I run a book club, is we would usually get senior management or senior leaders that would take the book club, and then what they would do is share their insights with the folks within their organization. But the way Marquet writes his book is it's almost done as a study guide. So he writes it in story form, but then he has questions at the end of every chapter. And what was great as a presenter, I didn't present. All I did was we would read it and we'd have a virtual meeting and then we would discuss the questions. And it was like a day off for me because I could let them come to their own conclusions. And all I was doing was just kind of helping facilitate. So it really does. It's one of those things that you can present this. And I'd also make the offer. It's not just this book. There's other leadership books I like. This happens to be one of my favorite. I love the story. I'm a scuba diver, so anything to do with underwater, what's not to love. But the reality is, you can do this concept of a book club as a training tool and as a culture change tool for any number of books. But again, you want to do it as a facilitator, not as a lecturer. So this is the link to the audio book, but it's also the link to the print book and other resources as well. Now, there's two shorter versions if you don't want to invest in the book. Marquet did a Turn the Ship Around talk at Google, and that was a 45-minute discussion. And it's good. However, I want to warn you, don't try to change your culture after listening to the Google talk. Because what will end up happening is if you don't get the whole journey, you may end up trying to change the culture and you don't necessarily have enough information to really do it effectively. So think of it as these videos are to get people interested in going down this road, but not as a source of all the information. And then the final one is something you could show at a safety committee meeting. It's Greatness by David Marquet. It's the YouTube presentation. It's only about 10 minutes. And what I call this is a tasting. It's just a tasting of the concept. And if people are intrigued by it, then you can start to get much deeper into this information. But again, some additional resources. SAFE also has a leadership page where we have about 20 leadership topics, and we have online learnings. Oh, by the way, you don't have to be SAFE insured. Public domain stuff. Go to the link. And we have topics that include handouts. Some of them include videos. Some of them even include online learning that people can do as well on various leadership topics. And if any of you wish to run leadership training, please reach out to me and I can tell you exactly how to use the resources that SAFE has available. Because, matter of fact, tomorrow I'm doing a presentation utilizing one of the topics from our leadership page. So there's kind of a very robust amount of information. Here's my contact information if you need to get a hold of me. And I just would like to send this encouragement out to everybody. If you are a presenter, do your very best to take your presentation as it exists, whatever it might be. And I'd like you to think of questions to ask the group, because many cases you could have a group of 10 people. One of those people might have the correct answer. And when I write a presentation, I write questions to ask the group that hopefully get me the answer that I need. And of course, if I don't get the answer from the group, then I'm happy to provide it. But when I do a presentation, it's question for the group. And then if they don't know the answer, I give them the information. If they know the answer, I can then present the information as well. See, you were right. But it means that instead of them listening to you for 45 minutes to an hour, you're listening to them for 45 minutes and they're just listening to you for 15 minutes. And it also shows you just how much your actual crew and the folks in your audience actually know. So I want to thank all of you that gave me your input today. And I just really want to say how valuable it was. And I'm hoping that if any of you are a little reluctant to allow participants to interject comments, think about some of the profound stuff we got today out of the participants in the audience. And just all I would say is when I do training, it's that on steroids. It would have been me asking 3 or 4 people that same question to get various input. So I'd like to thank all of you again, and it looks like I have 1 minute to spare, so I will stay on. I'm not going anywhere if you want to talk to me after the fact, but my presentation is done, and I will stay on as long as there's questions.